Hello and welcome to Join Our Town. My name is Ethel Maharg and I'm your program host. With us today we have Mike Cosgrove, Director of True North Financial Ministries. And our topic today is how important personal budgeting is and how it affects us in our economy. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here.
Now, Mike, will you tell us, do you see an increase in individuals struggling financially during this economy?
Well, you know, it's been a very difficult time, obviously, for the last few years. And we're seeing more and more people coming in. They continue to get into debt or their jobs have been cut. Heaven forbid they lose their job. But we have some people that are underemployed. They're losing a significant amount of hours. And, of course, we all spend the level of our income. So whenever we lose some money, it creates a difficult time.
So tell us about being underemployed. What would that mean to somebody?
Well, you know, we have some people that are going for maybe 40 hours or 32 hours a week, or they used to be getting overtime, and now they're not getting that anymore. And when those types of changes happen and somebody doesn't have a budget, they don't know how to respond to that, and they get themselves in financial trouble.
Okay, because they were counting on that money coming
in.
We
tend to do that as Americans, don't we? We
right.
spend the level of our economy, we get a raise, we spend that too.
and then some, right?
And then some, you bet.
Right. So, well, I guess that would be the next question. What are some of the major contributing factors that lead to overwhelming personal debt?
Oh boy, you know, that's a lot of things contribute to our personal debt, but probably one of the most important things is advertising. You know, we are inundated every single day, no matter where we go. People have advertisements on their hats or on their shirts or on billboards, television, radio. We get them all the time. And advertising combined with inability for us to say no leads us into personal debt, and we end up digging that hole and really getting in trouble.
Wow. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. Well, what are the signs and symptoms of poor money management?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the first things is probably a lack of savings. We are worst probably in the world as far as savings, considering how much money we make as a majority of people. But a lot of us don't have savings. We tend to spend it, and we have a very small savings. And if you don't save, then you're going to continue to get into debt. So having a poor savings account, plus not being able to say no and continuing to use credit cards and get into debt, that gets us in trouble all the time.
Well, how could someone that's maybe had that issue, they've been downsized, I mean, their time has been downsized, and then all of a sudden they're living on less and they're used to making more. How can that person begin to save? Is there a way that they can do that?
Well, yeah, first thing that I always recommend is decrease your spending.
Okay.
Stop looking at what you might want rather than what you need, and stop spending that money. And that's critically important. We tend to not be able to do that because we're told so much that we need to have the newest, biggest, brightest, shiniest things out there. We tend not to say no, so we go ahead and we continue to get into trouble. But we've got to build our savings. And another way to do that is to go ahead and sell some things. We have so much stuff that, man, I look around my house, I think, I could have a garage sale. I'd probably raise $200–300. That's a great way to start saving.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can do the same thing. I understand that perfectly. So, okay, so then why is having a personal budget, and again, why is that important to some people? Because people, that's the B word is they hate that.
Yeah, you don't want to use, let's call it a spending plan. That's a gentler way to do that. But the reality is that everybody needs a budget. And there's two real reasons to have a personal budget. The first one is for yourself. You know, we all have goals and dreams and things that we want to accomplish while we're on this earth and things that we want to do. And if you have a budget, it'll give you a better opportunity to be able to achieve those things that are important to you. From a kingdom perspective, it's so important to understand that God owns everything and that we're called to manage things on His behalf. And if you have a budget and you have it focused on the kingdom, not only will you be able to get out of debt and be able to have a more comfortable, peaceful life, but you'll also be able to glorify God and help with the Great Commission.
Okay.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
All right. So in other words, what you're saying is that without a budget, you can kiss your dreams goodbye?
You know, it really is, because frequently I get people that come into my office and, you know, they're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, and they'll say, you know, Mike, at this stage of my life, we really thought that we'd be here, but we're over here. And I'll say, what were your goals? What were your plans? And they didn't have any. And that's what gets us in trouble. So a budget combined with your goals, that's how you make things happen. You can't just get up every day and go to work and come home and expect everything that you want to have happen to happen. You got to have a plan.
Okay. So that's important. Not just the budget, but a goal to be tied with that budget.
Absolutely. In fact, that's the first step. You know, you want to be able to sit down, if you're married, you sit down with your spouse and you say, you know, where do we want to be in 5 years? What about 10 years, 20 years? Where are we going? What are we going to do? Because if you don't tell your money where to go, you're just not going to get there.
Right.
So having the goals is the first step, really, in establishing a good, solid budget.
I've heard that saying, if you don't tell your money where to go, it's going to tell you where to go.
Yeah, it will.
Okay.
It'll do that.
Okay.
So we've got to take control of it. We frequently don't do that. We just kind of live our lives every day. We go to work, we come home, but you got to know where you're going so you can tell your money where to go so that you can do the things that are important to you.
Okay. You mentioned people getting 50, 60, 70, of course, their retirement years.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might feel a little bit hopeless in that situation. Can they still recover some of that? I know that they're not going to be able to, like if they're 25, but
yeah.
can they still do something?
Absolutely. And that's a common misconception is that, well, I'm 65 years old, it's too late, the train's already left the station. You can accomplish so much financially by just starting at any age to plan and take control. And there's never a time that it's too late, never. As long as you're breathing in and out, you can make it happen.
Okay. All right, because so many people, like you said, there is a misconception that it's too late and they just throw up their hands and they just, what do? Go on the welfare roll or whatever it is that they have to, right? They get subsistence. So.
You bet.
What is critical to developing a practical personal budget?
Well, I'll tell you, the first step is to make sure that you make it something simple. And it's got to be effective. Too often we try to make things too difficult. We make things so hard. And whenever that happens, we're not going to stick with it very long. Same thing's true with a budget. If you get yourself in a situation where it becomes tedious and it's hard work, you're going to do it for a short amount of time, then you're going to go right back to the way you did things. So my first recommendation is to come up with a system that is very simple. My wife and I use something as simple as a 3-ring binder with paper in it. We don't even do it on a computer.
Okay.
And it works just fantastic. The second thing in establishing your budget is to make sure that you start thinking in terms of categories. How much do I want to spend on food? How much do I want to spend on clothing? What does it cost for my house utilities? Break down the income and the outflow into categories so you know exactly how much money you have to work with in a given category.
Okay, and then you spend up to what you have, and then you're done, right?
Then you just stop. Once you get up to a certain level, if you don't have any money in the clothing category, make those shoes last another month, until you get paid again.
Okay. Okay, what are some helpful tips for planning the budget? You said, well, that was simple. I mean, I've never thought about it, just a 3-ring binder, something that makes it easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something simple.
It's got to be something very simple. I guess probably one of the first things that you want to do is you want to just, when you're starting a budget, is establish your goals. We've talked about that already and how important that is. You've got to be able to communicate with your spouse. I don't know if you're aware, but the #1 cause of divorce has to do with finances. Very difficult.
Right.
And then just sit down and just come up with a very simple plan. Just simplicity is the key.
Okay. Mike, sometimes people take out loans to consolidate their debt in an effort to pay that down. Do you recommend that? Why or why not?
Oh boy, that's a great question. Consolidation loans are very common. And the premise is that, listen, I've got all this debt out here. I've got a large amount of money that I owe with high payments. If I consolidate that and get it into one lower payment, then I'll be able to save money and invest and plan for the future. And on paper, that works just fantastic to do that. So here's kind of my rules for a consolidation loan. If you're going to take a consolidation loan out, first of all, you have got to be living on a budget for a few months. I recommend 6 months, actually, of doing that. And here's why. What happens to a lot of people is they go to a banking institution and they get a consolidation loan and it lowers their payments down, but they have not changed their behavior financially. So a year from now, because they haven't changed their behavior, not only do they have a consolidation loan, but they went ahead and used their credit cards and they got back into debt again. So rather than making their life better, a consolidation loan can hurt you if you don't have the discipline and the knowledge on how to make that change.
Okay. So it goes back to that goal.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you're saying then is it's good, they work and then they don't. It just depends on what your plan is, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got to have a plan. Nothing wrong with a consolidation loan. You just have to make sure that you don't continue to spend the way you always have, or you're going to get in trouble again.
Okay, change your habits, all right. What are the reasons why personal budgets often fail?
Well, the first thing is probably communication between spouses. Very rarely does a husband and a wife talk about finances until there's something bad that's happened, until we're in trouble. You get that late bill or you find out that you're overdrawn at a bank or doing something. So that's probably the biggest reason it fails, is that people don't talk to each other beforehand. My wife and I have what we call money dates. Anytime that money comes into the household or has to be spent out of the household, we sit down and we talk about it together. And boy, I'll tell you what, just having that communication stops you from having those, let's call them discussions rather than fights. And you have those discussions that can be very heated.
Okay. All right. Why don't people talk? Is it something that's They're afraid? They're afraid they're going to get, okay.
I think it's because they're afraid, you know, and everybody comes to the table with different backgrounds. You're going to handle money a different way than your spouse is going to, and you need to change. Each of you needs to change to be able to get back on track, to do things together, and that's why that happens. And we just need to sit down and realize that we are going to approach money differently, and we need to just sit down and talk about that.
Okay. When is it advisable to seek credit counseling advice?
Oh boy, if you are in trouble or have any indication that you're going to be in trouble, maybe you missed a payment. Maybe you're getting letters from people, from collections agencies or things like that. As soon as that happens, engage someone that can help you. It's okay to do a budget at that time, but sometimes you're too far down the road to start that process, and you need to get some intervention. Frequently, unfortunately, people close their eyes to the problem and just say, well, if I ignore it, it'll go away, and it doesn't.
Right, it doesn't. Okay. What are the best ways parents can teach their children? Because actually it does start when you're little. It's not like you grow up and all of a sudden you have a problem, right?
Yeah.
What can the parents do to help their children be successful?
You know, I have to tell you, my parents taught me nothing about finances.
And most schools don't either.
You know, there was just so much going on. You know, I knew that sometimes we had bread and gravy and powdered milk and things. We knew we were struggling at different times, but we frequently don't want to involve our children because we might want to protect them. You know, let's not tell them that we're struggling and it'll be okay and we'll work it all out, but you're missing an opportunity to teach. And you should teach your children as soon as they're mature enough to be able to understand what's going on. And as you sit down around the table and you're talking about finances with your spouse, bring the children in, even if they're 10, 11, 12 years old, but mature enough to be able to understand it. Tell them what's going on. Explain to them how a budget works. And then when their peers are telling them that they need the new iPad, mom and dad can say, well, look at the budget. Can we afford that? And the children have a better understanding of why they may not be keeping up with the Joneses in those categories.
Okay. Well, that's good because then they grow up knowing that you just can't go and spend, correct?
You know, it teaches them life skills.
Right.
You know, you want your children to be able to be successful as adults, and money's one of those things that we need to take the time to teach them. Of course, all in context of God's Word, you know, and how that works.
Okay. So how do you plan for financial emergencies when at the same time you're trying to get out of debt?
Oh boy, that's a great question. You know, frequently we're so focused on the debt because it has an interest rate associated with it. You might be paying 19.99% on a credit card. And we say, well, listen, I don't want to put the money in savings so they get less than 1% there.
Right.
I'd rather put the money towards debt. But then when an emergency comes up and you don't have any savings, now you have to use your credit card.
Again.
And that's a debt cycle that's hard to break. Savings is the foundation of a financial plan. So here's what I recommend. I normally recommend that you make minimum payments to your debt and then build up $1,000 in a savings account so you have a nest egg that'll be able to help you if an emergency comes up. So decrease your spending, lower your payments down to the minimum, don't get behind, put $1,000 in savings, and then start going ahead and paying attention to your debt. There has to be a priority in the way that you do it. Savings is always number one.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much. You've given us such valuable information, and we'd like for you to stay tuned for the next section.